Welcome, everyone, to the L7C podcast. And today we have a very special episode. We are going to be talking some UFC with y'all today. And making his debut on the L7C podcast, we have Chuck Marlowe. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me, man.
Hey, no problem, man. Out of all of my friends, you're the one who's most knowledgeable about UFC and what's going on. And you can really break down this card that's happening this Saturday for us. So today we are going to be talking about UFC 254. We're also going to be asking Chuck questions about what's going on in UFC, the state of UFC, the women's division, John Jones and Israel's beef that was seen on Twitter, and that's actually going to lead to a fight and things of that nature. So to start it off, Chuck, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what got you into UFC and things like that.
Well, what got me into UFC was I was around sixth grade. I was like 12 years old. I was doing wrestling. First time ever trying wrestling. I tried to make the basketball team, got cut. Decided, hey, let's do wrestling. This looks like it's fun. Get to tackle people and wrestle people. I always used to like to fight. So I did that. My mom put me in MMA classes at Buckeye MMA. To get better at wrestling. And so from there, it kind of fell in love with it. Started watching Forrest Griffin, Rampage Jackson, all those guys back in the day. And I took it and ran with it.
Got you. So then what was the first UFC, I guess, big card pay-per-view that you got to see?
The one that I can remember, let me see. I'd say probably it would have been Rampage Jackson versus Chuck Liddell.
Okay. Yeah, and back in the day, that was pretty.
Yeah, the knockout on that one was insane.
That was. Now, do you just watch UFC? Do you keep up with Bellator too, or?
So I'm in and out with Bellator. So I have a UFC Fight Pass, of course, as any MMA junkie would. And I tend to watch some of the fights on there just to see the guys who are on the up and coming and on the rise. That is a good one to watch, definitely. And then there's also the underground fighting platforms that not a lot of people know about. If people go out in Ohio, you have fighters everywhere.
Okay. Oh, man, I didn't even know there was underground platforms going on.
Definitely, yeah. Most of the time, if people are going to a certain gym, they start their amateur career off, and that's where you can find some raw talent. Usually, people who haven't yet been molded, but they have the raw talent to be great.
And you don't usually typically miss any pay-per-views. You're usually tuned into each UFC pay-per-view, right?
Try to lock in as many as I can.
So let's talk about this card, UFC 254. So for a casual UFC fan, why should they buy this pay-per-view? What is appealing about this card?
Well, the main event, obviously. You have the undefeated Khabib going against the two-loss Gaethje, who's just on a storm, honestly. You've seen this power. This man has ridiculous knockout power. But he's not just one-dimensional as everyone's thinking. A little about Justin Gaethje. He's a wrestler as well. He's been a wrestler since he was little. And so that's what makes this so appealing, to see what can happen with Khabib and him on the feet and potentially on the ground as well. And then you have Whitaker on the co-main event against Jared. So those are two other sluggers. There's a bunch of sluggers on this fight card. And for most MMA fans, that's what they want to see. They want to see knockouts. They want to see a bunch of swinging. And they're going to get that in some of these fights.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Justin Gaethje, he had to be the interim champion because Khabib couldn't come over due to the coronavirus, correct?
Correct. So Khabib couldn't travel over for the UFC event when they were resuming back up. That fight build between him and Tony Ferguson was ridiculous. Everybody wanted to see it. Khabib versus Tony. Finally, it was supposed to happen. And then here came COVID, the miraculous destruction. and just tore it all up. And so no one could actually see that happen. Because eventually he went to, I think, Abu Dhabi, and he was trying to train there. And then they shut down Abu Dhabi. And then he went back to Russia, and then they shut down Russia. And they were like, well, you can't go anywhere, basically. And so he decided to just stay home. He couldn't leave. And there's no way that they could make the fight happen.
Got you. So then Gaethje steps in, beats Ferguson.
Oh, he destroyed Ferguson. Gaethje picked him apart like no other. He made Ferguson look like he just was 20 steps behind. The thing I will commend Ferguson on, that man has a chin. Most of those right hooks and left hooks that Gaethje was landing in that fight were like devastating. Those were the ones that he would use to knock out people on his current streak that he's on. And he knocked Ferguson off of his 12-win streak, which was the longest win streak, tied with Khabib right now. So we'll see if he can knock off another 12-win streak.
Hey, that's what we'll see. And at the end of the podcast, we're definitely going to get your predictions on who you think is going to win those big matches you just talked about and why. And then the fight time it's pretty early, isn't it? Around 2:00, the start of the card?
Yeah, it's a pretty early one. You know, being over in Abu Dhabi, they usually have a different time zone. So they want to start it pretty early for the fans.
Gotcha. I got you. So yeah, 2:00. If you guys are tuned in, make sure you tune into that. Chuck's going to give us his predictions at the end of the podcast. So definitely hear what for the betting people out there who are going to put money on this, make sure you take Chuck's advice at the end. So I want to keep talking about Khabib. Right now, he's ranked the second pound for pound men's fighter in the world on UFC.com. Number one is obviously John Jones.
The man.
When you think of Khabib, I feel as if you watch the sport, you know he's good. He's one of the greats, one of the greatest of all time. But if you don't watch it too heavily like you do, he doesn't get that much exposure nationally like a Conor McGregor does. So why hasn't that crossover appeal hit yet with Khabib?
It hasn't crossed over like that because Khabib is the silent killer. Khabib isn't one to go run his mouth in social media like a lot of fighters these days. Like you said, like the Conor McGregors, he's not going out to social media to cause beef or to start some drama and stir the pot. He's just like, I'm the best. You're going to have to come and fight me for my belt. And if you can beat me, you can't. There's just no way you can beat me. He's like, you have to fight me for my belt. I'm not going to say anything to you. We're just going to battle it out. I'll see you when I see you. He's like the Kawhi, I guess you could say, of the UFC.
Gotcha, because I think he's phenomenal. When Conor even fought him that first time, I knew Conor had no chance against him. But a thing that's been annoying me during this fight promotion stuff, everyone asked him at the end, oh, if you win, would you be interested in fighting Conor again? You know Conor's coming back. Like, I don't understand why they keep asking him that when he's deliberately said that he doesn't want to fight him again. So,
because they like the drama, they like the beef, they love the way that fight had ended because everyone saw this Conor McGregor status and like, oh, he's this, he's that, he's great, he's amazing, he's unstoppable. It's Conor McGregor. He has such a huge following, and for his fan base to see him get knocked down off the podium the way that he did. Because you got to understand, Khabib completely manhandled him. And the way that the fans see that, they're like, man, we want to see that again. We want to see if Conor can maybe redeem himself. Conor's on a comeback. Conor's on doing this because he beat Cowboy with some shoulder blows in like a first round, like in a second round knockout. Like, that's what the fans want to see. They want to see him get his belt back because they like someone who talks crap, because they want someone to represent them. But Khabib is more just quiet and self-reserved, and he'll represent his country and his fighters that he has coming from his country. So they don't really like that too much.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I feel like he should be getting talked about a lot more. This is a guy who hasn't lost, and he's just purely dominant, and he should be getting talked about a lot more than someone like Conor McGregor. Besides that fight with Cowboy, who wasn't even fully in UFC competing.
Yeah, like, Cowboy is getting close to retirement, as we can say.
Mm-hmm.
He's on his way out. He hasn't really won any fights recently. He's lost probably like the last three of his 3 fights, and he's losing to people like Conor, Anthony Pettis, who's also on somewhat of a win-lose streak, but he's also kind of on his way out with his age declining. So it's not really like you want to get someone who's really holds weight to their name right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're gonna have to wait and see on that. I don't know if that rematch is gonna happen. I mean, it takes a lot of money. Do you think that rematch is gonna happen?
I don't really see it happen. I could see it happening maybe for a fan aspect. Dana wants to make some money, but they're also talking about, so if Poirier and Conor, between that little friendly match that they have going on for charity or something like that, they're seeing who's going to win that fight, and basically going off of, if Conor wins, you fight Conor, or if Poirier wins, you fight him. But he's not really interested in either of them. He dominated both of them. Except one thing I will say, the Poirier fight was a little bit closer than what it seemed like for most of his fights, because I rewatched that fight, I think probably about 3 days ago, and saw him and through some unconventional stuff, which I'll get into that later, but it's going to make it very interesting to see this next fight.
I want to shift gears to, since Khabib's number 2 in the world, men, I want to shift gears to number 1, Jon Jones. So Jon Jones and Israel, Chuck, explain to me how this beef started, how this beef got so personal, and what is it even leading towards?
So for me, I have never really been one to follow beefs and drama, because I absolutely hate it. And I feel like a lot of the time it's scripted just to make some money and put some things out there. Like, but yes, it's like, I feel like it's just like WWE. We want to do this so we can market some stuff and we can boost our sales and get more fights put out there. But this one seems to be somewhat actually legit. I just think it started basically because Jon Jones usually watches fights, and he usually tweets out some things like when he sees people fighting, and I think Israel actually felt like he could beat Jon Jones, so he was just kind of talking some smack, basically just saying, oh, well, he was just saying basically he can beat Jon Jones, and that's where they kind of got into because their styles are similar somewhat in a way. So that's why they want to always compare them. And he kind of didn't want to be compared to Jon. And that's where this beef, I pretty much think, started. And so then they're going back and forth. Jon goes to Twitter, and then Israel decides, let me go to Twitter too. And then, they just start talking. Then you have the media who sees it, and then they start asking questions. And then he's like, you don't go to the media about me, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of a cat fight. And I feel like if it's actually going to lead to a fight, let it lead to a fight. But I don't see it happening anytime soon.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested would you be in that fight?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd definitely say a 10. That would be a good fight. It's 2 technical strikers, 2 very technical fighters. And I think it would be a great fight. It would be a great fight for the fans. But I also feel like it would be somewhat of a stalemate. So you're going to have a lot of long moments where they're trying to figure each other out and see what their game plan is for each other. So I feel like that will also bore fans, because fans, they don't like fights where fighters think, or they're sitting there strategizing, trying to figure out what they're going to do, or sizing up their opponent. They don't look boring to them. They want to see people just go gung-ho to the fence, just swinging, trying to do a slugfest. And that's great to see as a fan, but also for a fighter, you have to think about long-term longevity, the amount of blows you take to the brain and stuff like that.
Right. Now, who would have to lose weight, gain weight? Are they in the same weight class? Would Jon have to relinquish a title belt? What would have to happen for that?
So with that, they would have to kind of meet in the middle. Jon has just currently moved up to heavyweight, as you know, because he wants to go chase that belt at heavyweight, which I think is an amazing idea, because he got tired of light heavyweight. He feels like there was no more competition there. And he decided, hey, let me just jump up real quick and do this. And then you have Israel, who's still sitting there. I think, at the middleweight division, if I'm not correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to have to meet in the middle. It depends on how much weight John Jones puts in. And so if he puts on a lot of weight, it's going to be a lot for a weight cut. But if not, it shouldn't be bad. He'll probably have to cut about 20 pounds and then drop back down to light heavyweight. And then Israel will probably put on 20 pounds and drop up to light heavyweight. And they would probably meet there. The only way I see this fight happening is, and this will probably make it a mega fight, is Israel clears out the rest of his division. John Jones goes to heavyweight and he destroys them and takes the belt. And then, okay, let's keep beefing. And then, like, all right, we both have belts. Let's go down to middleweight and let me go up to middleweight. And then let's meet there and fight for the belt. And you have a mega fight. And that's what's going to make sales and projections. Because I know both of those fighters, they both talk about it a lot to Dana and they talk about it a lot in the media, but they want money. And that's one of the problems with those two fighters. I'm not saying it's a problem for them, but it's a problem that like they have on their hands because they're not getting paid enough as they think they should be. And I can agree to that.
Okay, let's hit on that. So you're saying that the fighters, those two particular, who John is the best in the sport, isn't getting the compensation that he thinks he deserves. What are they getting paid right now, and what's the issue?
So the fighters, I mean, if you look at how much Dana White brings in net worth, the guy's bringing in a lot of money. The UFC is bringing in a lot of money and bringing in a lot of buys. Yeah. You know how many people are starting to actually follow UFC? Now they definitely got the ESPN endorsement. Mm-hmm. So that platform was huge for him because you got to think about it. This was kind of like a underground thing back in the day. It was a hush hush type of thing. Like, no, we don't want to watch this. This is terrible. This is dangerous. Why is this even a sport? It was kind of frowned upon at the time. And then now it's at a point where everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look at Conor. Look at Khabib. Look at this guy. I want to be like this. I want to do that. I want to fight. You have kids watching it. You have people actually investing time in it. And people going to these, just selling out major arenas, fighting all over the world. And I just feel like they're not paying their fighters enough. I mean, if you look at John Jones' net worth, and you're like, wow, he's a pound for pound best fighter. He's the GOAT of UFC. You look at his net worth, it doesn't reflect that. It's at 13 million, I think.
Okay.
And that's just, if you think about the boxers of the world right now, you could be a lower grade boxer fighting on like not super main cards and like great fights, but you could still be probably making about the same amount as them, if not more.
Yep.
And fighters, like boxers, they get paid. They get their money. You look at Floyd Mayweather's, look at Manny Pacquiao's, look at the Lomachenkos, the Lopez's, the Anthony Joshua's, Deontay Wilder's, Tyson Fury's. They're all getting paid big money. If you look at their net worth, they're probably on a different scale compared to them. Floyd's basically a billionaire almost. And you have someone who's supposed to be a pioneer in the sport in John Jones, who's not making pioneer money.
So what is that, when you brought up boxing, because boxing, they have promoters, Floyd promotes himself. So that's something that UFC needs. I know Dana's the main promoter, but do each individual fighter need their own agent negotiating contracts? Like, how do they do that?
So at this point, I'd say they do, because I know at one point, I think, who was it? I think it was Ortiz, maybe. At one point, that's why him and Dana always beefed and butted heads, because he had went out and got a promoter because he felt like he wasn't making enough money. Dana doesn't like to deal with promoters. He doesn't like to deal with agents. He doesn't like to deal with people who don't want to fight. They have agents in fighting. They talk to each other, but he just doesn't like dealing with the middleman, because then he thinks that he's dealing with egos and divas, and he feels like people aren't going to want to fight as much if they're not getting paid as much. That's why he's always handing out these bonuses left and right, so they try to make the fighters fight even more aggressive or put on more entertaining fights.
Okay, man, that's something to look into, definitely for a later time to talk more in depth.
Because you got to think about some of these fighters. Like, I think when you first get in and you're fighting, you're making like $20,000 a fight. Even if you lose, and then you're getting probably, I think, $50,000 if you win. I forget which fighter said this, but he made $50,000 on his first fight, he got a knockout bonus, so he got an extra 50,000. But if after you take out taxes, and you got to think about the time lapse between their fights, they're UFC fighters. They're over here fighting, doing dangerous stuff, putting their body on the line. If you're not putting out like 10 fights a year, you're not making that much money. That's why a lot of these fighters still work regular jobs even when they're still in the UFC. You shouldn't have to work another job when you're a professional athlete. You have people still training and working, and that's why they can't, when they finally get to the point where they can say, hey, I don't have to work still and have another side job and train and be in the UFC and travel all over the world. That's the problem. Like, that's a huge problem. You shouldn't have fighters that still need to have another employment outside of your business.
Agreed. How many UFC fighters have endorsement deals?
Not that many, because like I said, it's still something that's on the rise. It's still kind of taboo, I guess you could say. And there's still a lot of fighters that don't have that endorsement. And then you have to think about the fact that UFC is already endorsed. So they're already kind of pushed towards certain endorsements like Reebok, Monster, Venoms, different ones like that. And they're kind of pushed already towards it since they're already endorsed by them. And they don't really have that much opportunity for other endorsements because it's seen as so taboo.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because I would even say, because you said it earlier, for me personally, UFC really blew up around like the 2012 to 2020 stage when I was going to B-dubs with the group. You were even at some of the fights too. We'd go there, be a big event, and the place will be there. There's definitely a fan base for UFC. If you didn't get to a B-dubs at, let's say, 6 and the main card started at 10, you weren't getting in because it'd already be packed.
Remember, because like that's when you started having like Jose Aldo versus Conor. You had Anderson Silva versus like Chael Sonnen. You had those little fights that would go on, and you started seeing it kind of rise a little bit. And I'd say Conor was definitely a huge pioneer for getting this a little bit to the level that it has, because UFC didn't have that much big of a fan base. They had a big fan base, but it just isn't on the level that it is now. It didn't have the notoriety. It didn't have the amount of eyes drawn onto it until really he kind of entered the sport, and he has a huge following.
Another person who brought that huge following was Ronda Rousey, and I want to shift gears towards the women because the pound for pound top woman fighter in the world right now is Amanda Nunes, who I personally think is the woman GOAT. So why does she not get that much exposure? When Ronda was on top, she was on TV every 2 seconds. When she lost, she was on TV every 2 seconds. Nunes has 2 belts right now, and nobody can touch her. And I barely see her on TV unless it's for her. I forgot.
Modelo.
She's a part. Yeah.
Ronda and is on, well, I guess because back to a Conor and Khabib type of aspect. And it sounds kind of weird to say, but I feel like when it's someone that's foreign, a lot of the time, I mean, you can say Conor McGregor's Irish, he's foreign, but it's not something that really draws to that many of the MMA fans, because I'd say are like usually white males. Like, I'm not trying to like stereotype here, but it's most of the following. When I first got into the sport, that's what it was. And so for Amanda Nunes, she's a lesbian woman, so that's kind of hard for her to get that much of a following. And then the women fighters in general, they just right now. A lot of people are like, oh, it's just the women. It's not entertaining. It's not going to be as great. But if I recall, Zhang Weili had the fight of the year, the best fight I've seen ever in my whole life. And they put on for the fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
She's not in the media constantly. She lays low with her wife and her new kid that they just had, probably, I think, about maybe a few weeks or a month ago. And she just does her thing. She trains. She's like, I'm the best there is. You're going to have to come and get me for, and you're not going to fucking beat me. So it's like, at that point, you're going to have to beat me for my belt. and you can't. So there's nothing you can do about it. She's not out there talking crap or trying to do these fake banters and everything like that just for promotion. She just wants to go in there and fight and take her belt home at the end of the day and go hang with her family.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So let's get back to this main card to knock it out. So I'm going to go from the bottom and work my way up. And I just want you to tell us, who do you think is going to win, by what round, and by TKO or just flat out knockout, submission, or decision. So first, we got the light heavyweight bout. We got Ion Cutelaba. How do you say that?
Cutelaba.
We got Ion, Cutelaba versus Magomed. I'm not even gonna try his last name.
Magomed. So for that fight, I have Magomed, and he's on a 12 win streak right now. He's coming out of Khabib's camp, and so I have him by submission, which is kind of random of a guess, and I'd say probably by the second round, like early second round, and it's kind of a wild guess to have. I think he's a slinger and he can get a KO, but I say it's by submission. He's going to show off some wrestling and he's going to dominate because that's what this camp does. And all the fighters that come out of Khabib's camp can wrestle their ass off. The one thing I would say is to watch, though, for Ion, and he has knockout power, and I wouldn't be surprised if he catches him a few times. But I still have Magomed second round by submission.
Got you. Next fight is the only women's fight on the card. Lucky Lauren Murphy versus Lilia Sarkova.
Correct.
Who do you have in this fight, and what round? And can you tell us a little bit about both of these ones?
So Lauren Murphy, I think she's been in the UFC for 5 fights. She's a veteran in the UFC. She's kind of older. Great fighter. She has some actual hand speed, and I think she has like a lot. She has a few KOs in there. So I'd say one thing to watch for her is her power. Lilia, she is a dark horse. So this is her UFC debut. I'm pretty sure she is she's very quiet fighter. She's going to be out there coming from that camp. So I'm saying she's going to be a wrestler with it, but I have her probably by the decision, and it's going to be probably a landslide. I think she'll win every round. She's going to dominate in every aspect.
Right. Heard it here first. Middleweight bout, we got Jacob versus Philip Paz. What do you know about these two? And
so these two, I haven't really had too much following on, but I know Jacob. He's this is his debut. He's a 4-0, I think, in his record for the not for the UFC, but in his career. And then Philip Paz, he's a tank. Like if you ever seen the man, he's a tank. I've seen one of his fights actually, and he is a tank. But I say I have Philip Paz winning this. The guy's going to lose in his debut, probably second round KO. It's going to be a slugfest. They're going to go out swinging, and I have Philip in the second round.
Philip in the second round. Now we're moving up the card to the top 3 matches. We got the heavyweight bout: Alexander Volkov versus Walt Harris. Who do you have in this match? And in what round?
I think this one will be great. Walt Harris is coming off of a loss. It's probably one of the most painful losses of his career. Alexander, I can't pronounce his last name, so I'm not going to try to. He had lost his daughter. I think it was this year or last year, and it was a tragic story. Got kidnapped. They couldn't find her. Then they found her body. It was a pretty sad story. I was rooting for him in that fight. I think everybody was. If you weren't, that's pretty messed up. I think he's gonna. I don't know. Alexander has power, so it makes me want to say he's gonna win. But Walt Harris was on a streak too when he was going through all of that stuff. And he said he found his love for UFC and fighting again. And I say Walt Harris, 3rd round knockout, like TKO. And it's going to be a slugfest. That one I think will be very bloody. And I still have Walt Harris though. I can't root against him in this fight. And I say he has a lot still pushing for him.
Going up even more, the middleweight bout, the fight you were talking about, Robert Whittaker versus Jared.
I got Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is coming back for his belt. He wants his belt back. He wants Israel, and he wants his belt back. I'm not saying don't sleep on Jared. Jared has power, but Robert is a man on a mission. He is coming for his belt. I have him probably, because I don't know if this one's a 5-round fight, if I'm not mistaken. If it's a 5-round fight, I have him in the 4th round. If not, I have him 3rd round going by decision, potentially TKO at the end, but I'm saying decision for my final answer on this one. Going to Robert Whittaker.
Then the main event, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. This is a match that everyone is ready to tune in and see. We've already talked about Khabib, undefeated. Gaethje's on the rise. Who wins this fight? What round? How?
All right, so this one, I'm torn still on this one, but this one I can't. You never want to go against Khabib. He's the most dominant fighter in the UFC right now, behind John Jones. I'd say maybe in front of John Jones right now currently. He's a man on a mission. He just lost his father recently due to COVID. He hasn't fought in about a year, so that's going to have a lot of drive and push behind him. But I still can't help but say Justin Gaethje, 4th round knockout. It's a long shot, but based off of what I saw off the last fight with him and Dustin Poirier isn't really a power striker, but he's a boxer. So he landed some hits on Khabib, and I don't really know if it made him stumble too much, but it looked like it made him stumble pretty good, and he got caught with some stuff. And what I saw with Gaethje versus Ferguson, the way he throws his punches, I think they both throw unorthodox styles of punches, and they kind of have a lot of offset strikes that they throw. And if you've seen Khabib like punches, he unorthodox punches. And so I feel like he might get caught slipping. And I think that he'll be able to handle himself in the ring wrestling against Khabib. I think he won't do absolutely I don't think he'll outclass Khabib in wrestling, but I think he'll do a little under the level of Khabib. He'll do just enough to get by, because, like I said, Gaethje's been wrestling since he was little. His career was molded after wrestling. If you a little bit about Justin Gaethje, if you haven't watched, you go on YouTube, go to Tiger Muay Thai. That's the gym that he trained out in Thailand for Muay Thai. And that gym is the next level, top tier. They breed fighters, and they generate some great fighters. And I think Gaethje has a lot. He's very multi-dimensional. I think he has a lot of different aspects to his game that will help him beat Khabib. Khabib is definitely not one-dimensional, but I'd say Gaethje has a lot more weapons than people really know about him. They think he's very one-dimensional and think he's a heavy hitter, and I'm ready for him to show off his skill set that he has.
So you have the upset. You have Gaethje winning first round by knockout. Well, we're gonna have to definitely tune in to see what your predictions have. I think, me personally, I feel like it's gonna end in the 4th round, but I got to be by submission.
Rear naked choke, the safe bet. I can understand that one.
Yeah.
For all the risk takers out there in Vegas, I'd take the pick.
Yeah. Until I see otherwise, that the guy's he's the top dog. But if Gaethje beats him by 4th round knockout, it makes things very interesting, especially for that rematch.
Rematches definitely would be in play. That's what everyone's going to want to see. But you also know the other people that they were going to want to throw in there. They're always going to want to throw McGregor in there because that's what people want to see. That's going to be one of the fights that definitely happen after this following. But another fight that might follow, depending if Khabib wins or not, probably still will happen if Khabib loses. GSP.
Yeah. He openly
And
said
Khabib said he's definitely down for it. So that would be amazing. I'd love to see GSP come back. The man still got it.
That'd be a great fight. Hopefully it happens. We're gonna have to wait and see. Well, that's it. UFC, Chuck. You wanna plug anything? I know you have a Twitch account. You have a YouTube account. You want to give our listeners the names for that so they can go subscribe.
So yes, my Twitch is Chuck the Duck MMA. You can follow me on there. Twitter, Chuck the Duck MMA. YouTube, Chucky the Ducky MMA. Just give me a follow on those platforms. I'll have some videos and content being pushed out. Definitely going to start a vlog as well. That's something that I'm starting soon. I've taken probably the past 2 or 3 months off of training for MMA due to the fact that I've been working a lot recently and I have a kid on the way. But I plan on getting back in the gym with that. And I want to show you guys the start of a career to the end. So give it a follow.
That'd be great to see. And if you guys can find Chuck's channel on YouTube, go to the L7C, the Level 7 Crew L7C YouTube. We actually have him featured on there. So just check featured channels, and Chuck is the only channel we have featured. And then anytime he's streaming, the L7C Twitter always retweets it to let people know that, hey, our guy's out here streaming. Definitely give him a look. He's very entertaining. He plays 2K. He plays Call of Duty. He plays Naruto, Boruto, Shinobi Strikers. He has a Madden League. So he's very diverse. So if you're into any of those video games,
thank you.
Check the man out. Well, thank you for coming on, man. Definitely would like to have you on to analyze these fights when they actually happen and go
definitely
results.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. We appreciate your guys' support. Thank you, Chuck, once again for being our UFC expert, making his great debut. And we're going to have him back to talk more UFC. Thank you guys once again, and you guys take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.